All right, guys, back here on Southeastern 14 with Max Barr. My goodness, we were both like on the DL today. Like we are just trying to battle through this video. You would laugh at some of the things that have prevented us from doing this video to this point. But we are going to talk about Amari Williams to Kentucky, as we are going to, of course, cover every single SEC basketball transfer this offseason. And before we talk about this edition from Mark Pope and company, let's tell you, as always, about our friends at BetOnline, your number one source for all your summer sports this season. From MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats, you can find those there, plus news and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head on over to their website today or use the mobile device to get on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Max, you're going to carry some of this because of my voice, but Amari Williams joins Kentucky from the Drexel Dragons, and this is a big pickup, quite literally, because you've got a 6'10" guy with a 7'5" wingspan, as you see on the screen here, three-time CAA Defensive Player of the Year. And listen, we were talking about if John Calipari came back to Kentucky, we said, all right, what's the one thing they've got to do better? We said they've got to go out and build a team around some defense and get much better on the defensive side and have someone that is a proven kind of stopper / do-it-all guy defensively. Now, I don't think he's going to be out guarding 6'1" guards, but this is a guy who can certainly make a huge impact on defense by him joining the mix. I know, as you're going to discuss, there was a good chance he was going to wind up in the SEC at some point because a lot of SEC teams were after this guy, but quite literally a huge pickup, I think, for Mark Pope in what is very few people on the roster right now for Kentucky, but you'll certainly take a guy like Amari Williams.
Oh, it's a fantastic start. It's a fantastic start. And it's crazy how things work out like this, Blake. We did that whole during the whole coaching carousel, which still feels like yesterday. We went back through Kentucky's analytics every year and we said, what has every good team been and what has every underachieved team been? And it was clear as day the defensive analytics were the trend that held through with the not overachieving, but the teams that really did well. Well, you can't get any better than the only 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in CAA history. Perfect start. I like how you mentioned the amount of SEC schools that recruited this guy. Half the conference. Texas, Florida, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Mississippi State was the team they really beat out. It was down to Mississippi State and Kentucky. Mizzou, Arkansas, and then obviously Kentucky. Yeah, outside of the conference, you had teams like Greg McDermott and Creighton, Indiana, Pitino, and St. John. So this guy was one of the highest recruited guys in the portal, and for good reason. 7'5" wingspan, Blake. 7'5" wingspan. I feel like I don't know what mine is, but I feel like it's like 3'5" compared to 7'5". You watch this guy's highlight, and he's not just this guy that's just trying to swat shots left and right. You pump fake on him, he stays down, doesn't bite. You put him through a bunch of action and try to pull him away from the basket. He's too athletic. Look, he goes right through it. He's been top 40 nationally in block rate 3 years in a row, but also doesn't foul. He's a clean, fundamental defensive lockdown rim protector, and one of the best in the nation at it.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you talk about like the defensive rim protection and all that. I mean, this is a guy, you're pulling up the KenPom stuff here. I mean, this guy is, again, look at his numbers, right? And you see like the past 3 years, really. I mean, that's when he started playing a lot there. And, he's averaged at least 7.3 rebounds per game each season. 22-23 averaged about 9 rebounds per game, about 8 last year. He's averaged at least basically 2 blocks per game the past 3 seasons, which we talk about. That's what earned them, the accolades of being the 3-time CAA Defensive Player of the Year. Certainly has picked up steals just based on, his ability to impact shots and those kind of things. And so, like, he's been pretty consistent. And I think that's, again, something else that really stands out with this guy is just the consistency that you've seen there. And I think that's something that's necessary. And let's call it what it is, too. Again, remember, we are talking about each of these transfers in a vacuum, especially when you talk about Kentucky, because we don't know who else is going to be on the roster. So It's like we have no idea how the rest of the roster is going to look. But at least right now, if you're looking at how Mark Pope could build this roster around a guy like Amari Williams, well, you feel like you've got your interior defensive guy who's going to be able to add some production offensively as well. But you kind of take away one of those necessity now. You filled this void with a guy who can just really impact the game, knowing how many plays are made at the rim in the SEC. We always talk about that, a very high free throw rate league, because you have a lot of guards that can take off the dribble. You've got a lot of talented, swing forwards and big man who can make plays at the rim. So, yeah, like these are the kind of guys that are like they're a necessity. I feel like in this era of the SEC especially. And again, we're going to have two more teams joining the mix too in Texas and Oklahoma. And so, yeah, I feel like this is a really good, proven, consistent upperclassman, maybe most importantly for Kentucky fans, an older guy coming in that kind of can be a Swiss Army knife defensively for them.
Yeah, and the craziest thing about the consistency of these numbers, Blake, is this is in the CAA with Charleston, with Wilmington, with these quality coaches that are coaching in high major programs now. Like CAA is not just some like chump mid-major conference that advanced players can just blow through. It's a good conference.
Drexel finished second in the league too, just for everyone who wasn't aware.
Yeah.
Like they finished second behind Charleston. They were 13-5 in the league. Charleston went 15-3. So they're finishing ahead of Hofstra and UNC Wilmington and teams like that. So
yeah, you got a guy on a good team from a good conference. Okay, so we've talked about the blocks. Okay, we've talked about the rebounding. I mentioned a little bit how he doesn't foul. If you look up here, the FC 40, fouls committed per 40 minutes, go straight down. He doesn't foul, stays out of foul trouble. But then look at right to the right of that, fouls drawn per 40 minutes. This guy is active on the offensive end. He knows how to draw contact. He drives. He's just as good as he is defensively at not biting on pump fakes and not biting on all that little cheeky offensive stuff to draw fouls. He's just as good as it on the offensive end also. I know we're going to label him as a defensive guy, but he brings offense. He's not just pure defense. He does have offense.
Yep, that's important to note because I think we're going to lean towards the defense because we know what the biggest weakness was of Kentucky last year.
Right.
But like you said, that offensively too, he's going to fill some of those gaps and be able to, again, on the interior, be able to do some things. And, so I think this is a significant addition. And I think what's important here too to keep in mind, you look at, and we haven't really talked about this in a separate video, but the staff that Kentucky has built, around Mark Pope, like Alvin Brooks, Jason Hart, like Mark Fox, a former SEC head coach. He brings the guy over from BYU. Like this is a very talented staff that has a lot of connections and has been around, in terms of their experience recruiting and all that. So like, to me, this is just the beginning for Kentucky. I mean, it has to be, they have to fill the roster. We know that, but I think these are the kind of guys you see, the kind of value they're going to bring to the way that Mark Pope wants to do this. And you mentioned that specifically, the playing style for Mark Pope, which we talked about in some of those initial videos that we did here on the channel. You guys can find those to get our full thoughts on that. But like this is a guy who's played a lot of basketball. We talked about the need for upperclassmen. He'll get to the line quite a bit just because of the nature of his game. Average free throw percentage, I mean, he's not going to be shooting like a guard. I mean, he's going to shoot around 65%, which he shot a career best 66% from the line this past year, so it's gone up in that regard. But, yeah, like a guy that I think the best way to put it, like you said, offensive rebounding numbers, too, really good.
Yeah.
So, I mean, really, you look across the entire stat line for this guy, and there are things he can do other than shoot threes. Like, he can do pretty much everything else. Like, he's going to fill the stat sheet in some sort of way, whether it is making shots, right? It's rebounding, being able to pass out of certain situations where you're probably going to get double teamed, those kind of scenarios, kick it to a guard for an open shot or, kind of hand it off to someone else coming down the lane, block shots, grab a couple of steals based off impacting things defensively. Yeah, like, I mean, as we say, we always try to find what are the reasons you should be optimistic when you land these players in the transfer portal. Amari Williams gives you plenty of reasons for optimism based on his numbers. So,
this might be jumping the gun because I don't know the roster. I mean, I don't know what they're gonna do. But right now I'm penciling this guy in without a doubt, you got your starter at the 5. You got him. There's a reason half the conference recruited this guy.
Yeah.
That we've been talking. If you've been following our offseason transfer coverage, we've been talking about, okay, this guy's been highly recruited. No one has been recruited by 8 SEC schools. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And think about what some of those SEC schools were losing, right? Mississippi State, who did they lose? They lost to Toulouse Smith, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you go down the line of the schools we mentioned and what they really needed the most to kind of fill some of the gaps of guys that are exiting. Toulouse Smith at Mississippi State. Florida loses a Tyrese Samuel, right? I mean, you keep going down the list. And so, yeah, like this is what Kentucky got him for. Like he was going to fill that void for these other schools and kind of be that guy, like you said, that's going to be a starter, probably going to play around 24, 25 minutes a game maybe, something like that. But it really is going to depend on what the rest of the roster looks like. But, yeah, I mean, a significant addition. And I don't think there's any question, like you said, that he's going to be filling the stat sheet for Kentucky. If he's not, then Kentucky's probably in trouble because it feels like he is someone who can do a lot of things. And I'm excited to see how he fits into, like we said, it's so bizarre to kind of have to do it this way, but we don't know who he's going to be playing with. So we're just waiting to see, and maybe that'll tell us more about how his game can open up even more with this Kentucky squad. So,
yeah, I've got nothing to add. I'm stoked for him. I'm stoked. Kentucky fans, you should be stoked too. You got a guy that you can dump it down to also, Blake. Like you can throw it down to him and just let him do his thing. We weren't able to do that last year. So
yeah, and I think I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but he did mention, right, that he was going through the draft process, but I think that's part of just the whole.
I think that's just the old just hey, go test the waters just because it can't hurt you type of thing.
Yeah, I think that's right. So just keep that in mind. I know people sometimes can make a lot of that, but so we'll see what happens from here. But Amari Williams joining Kentucky, and of course we'll have them all covered. SEC basketball
we'll
transfers.
have a lot more of these.
We're doing videos. Yeah, Kentucky fans, we got a lot more coming for you because you got to fill your roster. And so we'll be doing that for every transfer in SEC basketball. Some will be grouped together, some will be solo like this, but we will have them all covered throughout the offseason. So hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out. We appreciate you guys watching as always here at Southeastern 14, and we'll talk to you again soon with more SEC basketball transfers.